What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 2 of my top 10 favorite cats in video games. For those are wondering where part 1 is, it's up on my channel now. So if you want to see which kitties made it on to numbers 10, 9, and 8, I suggest you see that video, then come back to this video for the next group of cats. Yeah, this is gonna end up being a 3-parter, but what you gotta do? Cats are my thing. That being said, without further ado, let's get back into it. Moving on next at number 7, we have Nia from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Yeah, at this point, I've never played a Xenoblade Chronicles game to its fullest, but I actually want to. And I've wanted to ever since I saw Chugga Conroy play through the original Xenoblade Chronicles on his channel. And naturally, I've been awed at the entire series, especially Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And yeah, I know the whole anime aspect is part of it, but when it comes down to it, I like the whole idea of the blade and driver mechanic, and the driver and blade mechanic that the game gave us. And it's even more interesting as we see so many characters that are actually some of the best. Of course, that being said, one of them just so happens to be a Gormati. That being Nia. Now, you're possibly wondering, but Gormati aren't exactly cats. And, well, at this point, I'd have to say, well, yes, but also no. I mean, Gormati are cat-like beings that more or less are found in the world of Alrist, specifically being found in certain areas. And honestly, Gormati are kind of the more interesting characters when you think about it. I mean, in fact, Torn of the Golden Country gave us the character of Milton, who kind of acts as a little brother figure to Mithra. But that being said, but when it comes down to it, Nia is kind of a perfect follow-up to Milton, since she's basically your standard cat girl. As she's basically a rough and tumble girl who curses up a blue streak and is more or less willing to fire back with a witty comeback or pithy remark. And just full of sass and attitude. And keep in mind, there's a good amount of chance that a few more catgirls are gonna make it onto this list. But yeah, it really does say a lot. But even with that, it's that sort of sass and attitude that makes her one of my favorite characters. Granted, considering how she was raised by a Gormati individual, yeah, she basically has a nice little backstory. Of course, that being said, once you realize that she was initially a blade for that Gormati individual's daughter, who eventually died, leading her to more or less become a flesh eater, to become, well, human when you think about it. It's basically one of the most tragic backstories I've ever seen. And the fact that, and eventually when she ends up revealing her blade form to everyone in order to save them, him in order to save them. It's one of the most. It's one of those triumphant moments that anyone would have ever wanted to see. I mean, heck, even her friendship. Well, I guess I'd say her relationship with Rex, with the fact that the both of them kind of start off as, I guess I'd say, rivals, but eventually becoming fire-forged friends, really does say a lot. And it really fits into her entire friendship with everyone. Granted, spoiler alert to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, we all know what happens in that one, and all I gotta say is, Rex, you absolute Giga Chad. Yeah. Also, the fact that she shows up as the Queen of Agnes, alongside Melia, who is the Queen of Kevis in that game, honestly, I really want to play Xenoblade Chronicles 3 now. Also, there's another spoiler alert, so yeah. I'm not gonna spoil that. Just play Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It is amazing. Also, where do you see a cat paired up with a tiger? You don't see it all that much, and it is awesome. Alright. Moving on next at number 6, we have Blaze the Cat from the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Yeah. Granted, for those that already don't know, I'm on the autism spectrum. And when it comes down to it, there are more often than not there's sort of a kind of relationship between autistic individuals and the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. To the point that many autistic people will more or less see a link, or have Sonic, or at least will have Sonic as a sort of autistic special interest. Granted, this is not me, since mine just so happens to be Pokemon and Fire Emblem, but when it comes down to it, I have played several Sonic games, because my cousins had a Sega Genesis, and I used to play Sonic games like Sonic 3 and Knuckles or Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis back when I was a kid, as well as of course I have Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Saturn on my Nintendo, on one of my 3DSs, or on my 2DS. But when it comes down to the Sonic games past the advanced generation, past the adventure titles, I haven't played them all that much. I mean, let's be real, they actually look pretty good. I mean, especially Sonic and the Black Knight and Sonic Unleashed, which just so happen to be two of my favorites from Let's Plays alone. But even with that being said, Sonic when it comes down to it, the only exposure I've had to Blaze was through the Mario and Sonic series. And that's in comparison to her fellow princesses, Peach and Daisy. But the fact that Blaze serves as a sort of antithesis to Sonic, being a more cool, level-headed, and somewhat aloof individual in compared to Sonic's radical, too cool for school, 90s era personality, it really serves as a sort of nice, refreshing aspect to her. And in her first appearance, when she shows up, trying to get back the Soul Emeralds from both Eggman and Eggman Nega, and her just learning to work together with Sonic in order to save them. Yeah, it's kind of one of the more biggest turning points of the Sonic franchise. And even after Sonic Rush, even after Sonic Rush, she's been more or less learning to come out of her shell easily enough with many other people. Specifically when it comes to Cream the Rabbit, who is, the fact that we have what is essentially a 4 or 5-year-old rabbit helping a cat princess from the Soul Kingdom come out of her shell really says a lot. And then there's her entire friendship with Silver the Hedgehog, Sonic 06 notwithstanding, that really, he serves as a perfect sort of combination. Honestly, really just says a lot. And it makes me realize I need to play more Sonic. Just makes me realize it. Need to play more Sonic. Moving on next at number 5, we have Leaf from the Fire Emblem Teleus franchise. Oh boy! And if you're wondering if this if part 2 is gonna be all catgirls, trust me, I'm not that kind of person. But when it comes down to it, and honestly, it's fair to say that more often than not, when it comes down to it, the fact that 3 of them are catgirls really kind of proves how solid cats are. And when it comes down to it, like Blaze and Nia, Leaf more or less starts off as a sort of an aloof tsundere. And this isn't in a slight on her, as more often than not, the Lagoos have mostly, in the Teleus franchise, have mostly dealt with a lot of, well, dare I say, prejudice against them by other people. Specifically the humans, or as they call, Bayork. And the fact that I have played through Path of Radiance like fully once or twice before, it really says a lot of how awesome Leaf is. I mean, granted, you do have characters like Mordecai, Moirim, and Ronald who are equally pretty solid. But Leaf really does serve as a sort of interesting character. She's fast, and while she doesn't hit as hard as Mordecai, she's able to do enough damage to keep her going all the way until the finale. And more often than not, it's throughout the events of Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, she's learning how to come out of her shell and more or less trust Bayork. Even in her supports with Jill, who is more or less known for who was initially known for her prejudice against the Lagoos. It's more or less with them just learning the differences between them and learning how to overcome their individual prejudices. And the fact that in the A support, when it just leads to a sort of, understanding between Jill and Leaf that kind of results in in a more friendship, allowing in a nice little friendship, really does say a lot. Which Path of Radiance said more than 5, but what are you gonna do? What I gotta say. This will be continued in part 3.